Eat this for improving your gut health and losing weight easily and not struggling with cravings anymore. Fixing your gut is key if you want to eliminate the main cause why you keep reverting back to your old habits. One of the main reasons that 95% of dieting attempts fail is because of intense, uncontrollable cravings, in addition to low energy and motivation. Most of the time, when people go on a diet, they're not fixing the root cause, which is a low number of dopamine receptors, specifically D2 receptors in their brain. And when you don't fix that, you're going to eventually hit across those walls where you're constantly unmotivated, unproductive, and you have uncontrollable cravings. All those things are determined by how much D2 receptors you have in your brain. Now, about this video, this is going to focus specifically on how gut health is the single most important determinant of your baseline levels of these brain chemicals. In other words, your gut health is going to determine how much D2 receptors you have in your brain on the surface of your brain cells or nerve cells. Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Zaldivar. I have a Ph.D. in nutrition and exercise physiology from the University of Miami. Actually, my dissertation for 7 years was focused on how to raise baseline dopamine levels and how to increase the amount of D2 receptors in our brain in order to address chocolate cravings and sugar addiction. I was also featured on the first ever TV show on the carnivore diet called Reverse TV series, and I've taught for decades at the University of Miami and a bunch of other places, including the American College of Sports Medicine. And I've coached thousands of clients, and you can check out the testimonials on my website, DrZALDIVAR.com. I also lost 30 pounds and managed to maintain it specifically by using my protocol, by raising my baseline dopamine levels. And I will show you my transformation picture. I'll remember to show it to you at the end of this lecture. So a brand new study that just got published in June 2024 revealed something very exciting. And that is your microbiome determines whether or not you're going to be addicted to food. In other words, whether or not you're going to have cravings for food. Don't let the word addiction stop you, because I know a lot of people don't like to hear that word because they associate it with the inability to control their food intake. And that's just not true. Just because you have food addiction, millions of people can overcome that, no problem. Addiction simply is a very strong habit that has taken root in your brain. And it just means that we have to work a little bit harder to reverse that ingrained habit, as opposed to other habits that we don't classify as addiction. And I know that can be a little controversial for some people, and it's fine if you're, let's say you're sober from alcohol and you prefer to think of it in a different way. That's completely fine. Do whatever works for you. But in my work, specifically with food addiction, I find that this approach is far more successful. So this study was published in June 2024, and it was only available online in October of 2024. It was published in the journal Gut Microbiota, and they showed that people who were diagnosed with extreme food addiction, as measured by the Yale Food Addiction Scale, had less of the gut bacteria Blotia wechsleri. In that paper, not only did they analyze the microbiome of humans, but also of mice. And both humans and mice showed the same trend in their microbiome and showed the same effects whether or not they were addicted or not, depending on their microbiome. So what they did in this study, they gave them non-digestible carbohydrates, lactulose and rhamnose. I'm going to talk more about those in a second, because those two carbohydrates that we don't digest, they become fuel for Blotia microbe for it to grow. And so that indeed is what happened. They gave them lactulose and rhamnose, and that increased Blotia in the gut microbiome in mice species. And here is the best part. At the same time that they did that, they saw dramatic improvements in food addiction in the mice. A similar improvement was revealed after oral administration of Blotia wechsleri as a beneficial microbe. So also, when they gave the mice the probiotic Blotia wechsleri directly, that also led to the same improvements in food addiction. So the first non-digestible carbohydrate that they gave the mice was lactulose. It's not very abundant in natural food sources. Lactulose is actually widely detected in heated milk. So only when you heat the milk do you have lactulose generated. But it is so powerful in promoting a healthy gut that they added routinely to infant formula. Also, lactulose helps prevent constipation and it increases the speed or the motility of your colon. And so, the way in which lactulose administration functions as a laxative is by increasing the colonic motility or the speed with which your digestive tract works. The other non-digestible carbohydrate that they gave in order to promote the growth of Blotia probiotic in the guts of the mice was rhamnose. Rhamnose is found in beans, peas, legumes, nuts, seeds, and fruits and vegetables, most likely because they're high in a specific type of fiber called pectin. Now, rhamnose given to mice that are genetically designed to develop food addiction completely prevented the development of addiction in the mice. That's how powerful of an effect it had. Not only that, but rhamnose seems to be more powerful than lactulose in preventing food addiction. I'm going to quote exactly what the authors wrote in this paper. Both non-digestible carbohydrates had a protective effect since their administration completely avoided the development of addictive-like behavior in mice. This beneficial impact was more pronounced in the case of rhamnose with more significant outcomes than lactulose. Also, giving Blotia as a probiotic, like in pill form, for example, also prevented food addiction from developing. So you can either take Blotia as a probiotic supplement, or you can harbor its growth and promote its growth by eating the food that it needs, which is rhamnose and lactulose. Another probiotic that they identified as playing a very big role in addiction or cravings was Lactobacillus kefiri. The species Lactobacillus kefiri was also reduced in humans diagnosed as food addicted, suggesting a potential beneficial effect similar to what was described for mice at the family level. So not only in mice, but also in humans, they showed the same pattern. They didn't have enough Lactobacillus kefiri, and that's why they probably got addicted. Now, we did not establish causality here, but the correlations was really strong. Where can you get that probiotic strain? Beer, kefir drink, and kefir grains. I am not going to recommend the grains, and I most certainly am not going to recommend the beer, but you could drink kefir, and that will provide your microbiome with enough Lactobacillus kefiri. Just be careful when you're increasing the amount of probiotics that you're ingesting. There is a die-off effect whereby you're probably going to feel a little bit worse off before you feel better. So I recommend gradually increasing your intake of probiotics to not weather a very strong die-off effect and feel really bad. So you want to slowly increase the kefir, because as the Lactobacillus kefiri and other good probiotics start to get stronger in your gut, they're probably going to lead to the death of the other bad types of bacteria that inhabit your gut. And when the bad bacteria dies, it's going to release waste products that are going to make you feel a little bit bad initially. Another powerful study that I'm going to go over was published in October 2018. And they showed how your gut sets the tone for how many D2 receptors you have in your brain. So specifically in the study, they got rats and they tried to get them addicted to alcohol. Only 15% of the rats actually ended up getting addicted. And the rats that actually got addicted were shown to have less D2 receptors in their brain. In other words, the rats that got addicted to the alcohol were the ones that had low baseline dopamine levels. And interestingly, they also had higher dopamine 1 receptor or D1 receptors in their brain. So we have several receptors for dopamine. For dopamine to do its job, it has to be released from one brain cell and it has to attach to a certain receptor on the adjacent on the cell surface of an adjacent brain cell. And you have 5 different main types of dopamine receptors: D1, D2, D3, D4, D5. D2 is the one that is very heavily implicated with addiction and overweight and obesity. So the more overweight or obese you are, the lower your baseline dopamine level is, and the less D2 receptors you have, the more addicted you are to anything, whether it's food or whether it's alcohol or hard drugs also, the less the amount of D2 receptors you have in your brain. Also, D1 receptor has to do with phasic dopamine activity. Phasic means every time you have a cupcake or a drug or you splurge on a shopping spree, things that are addictions or cheap sources of dopamine where you didn't really work hard for that dopamine, they're going to release a lot of dopamine in a short period of time. So it's going to spike really high for a short period of time, and that works on the D1 receptor. Whereas baseline dopamine, also known as tonic dopamine activity, that activates the D2 receptor. And so with addiction, we have more D1 receptor because we're constantly getting cheap hits of dopamine. So we're constantly activating D1 receptors, and we're destroying our D2 receptors. So we end up having more D1 receptors and less D2 receptors. And so the goal is to reverse that. Now, a really powerful result of the study was that they showed significant correlations between the microbiome and dopamine receptors. In other words, an unhealthy microbiome was correlated with lower baseline dopamine levels or lower numbers of D2 receptors, and vice versa. And then it just goes to show you how powerful the bacteria that inhabit your gut, how much they affect the health of your brain and your tendency to reach out for addictive foods or foods that just taste too good, that you have trouble resisting and you have trouble controlling your intake of. And this is my 30-pound transformation picture. So the main way that I was able to do that and maintain this weight loss for a very long period of time is by raising my baseline dopamine levels. And I will send you also the diet that I mainly follow that also helps me maintain this high level of D2 receptors in my brain. It's called the carnivore diet. When you sign up to my newsletter on drzaldivar.com/newsletter, I will send you a free copy of my 30-day carnivore diet challenge guide. And if you are interested in learning how to raise your baseline dopamine levels so that you're not suffering while you're attempting to heal your gut, then I would highly suggest looking into my brain bundle. The brain bundle on my website, drzaldivar.com/shop. The brain bundle includes the 3 most important guides that teach you how to raise your baseline dopamine levels. Dopamine Brain goes over a specific exercise protocol that I recommend, because every time you work out in a specific way, it's going to increase the amount of D2 receptors. The stronger your workouts, the more intense your workouts, the higher your D2 receptors. And so the more you want to raise your D2 receptors, you can do that by simply training harder and longer. And I explain more about the exercise protocol in the guide. And then Monster Mindset can do the same, because if you cannot work out, you can still raise your baseline D2 receptor numbers by certain forms of visualization. And I explained the difference between 2 types of visualizations that I've introduced, called energy versus training visualizations. If you can work out, I highly recommend doing both the workout protocol and the visualization protocol, because then you would truly become unbeatable. And then the supplement guide explains all of the potential supplements you could be using to also raise baseline dopamine levels. And if you are interested in working with me one-on-one, you can check us out on drzaldivar.com/coaching. And the guides are on drzaldivar.com/shop. Thank you so much for watching. Check out those other videos that might be of interest to you. And if you found this information to be helpful, make sure you share it with friends and family members that could benefit. And also make sure you let me know that you enjoyed this type of content by leaving a thumbs up, subscribing, and hitting that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.